They say 5 years together should mean certainty, but last night I learned otherwise. My fiancé Richard looked me straight in the eye across a candlelit table and admitted he wasn't sure about marrying me. Then, as if to drive the knife deeper, he laughed with his friends hours later and said, "If you were prettier, I'd marry you." This morning, his mother called me in tears. It feels unreal to even write that sentence. Richard and I, Richard, the man who once swore he couldn't imagine a life without me, have been inseparable for more than 5 years, engaged for the past 8 months. We first met at a crowded housewarming party neither of us wanted to attend. He teased me for turning down a trendy IPA, and I mocked his nostalgia for old Saturday morning cartoons. We ended up sitting on the balcony for hours, laughing about everything and nothing, until the world outside seemed to vanish. From there, life unfolded easily. We dated a year before moving in together, adopted our spoiled cat Beans after 3, and last summer, during a quiet morning hike, he pulled out a small velvet box with shaking hands. His proposal wasn't grand, but it was sincere. No fireworks, no orchestrated speeches, just the two of us on a rocky overlook while he stammered out the words, "Will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation. By the time we reached the trailhead, we were already throwing around ideas for the wedding. I set the date for October, and by I really mean me. Richard mostly nodded along, a quiet smile here, a distracted sure there. I chalked it up to him being a typical guy, disinterested in flowers and colour palettes. But about 3 months ago, the first cracks appeared. Little things. When I showed him venue options, he muttered, "That's a lot of money for one day." When I talked about invitations, he sighed, "Do we really need all those people?" His responses to my texts about caterers or music became delayed, sometimes nothing more than a careless, "looks fine" or "whatever you want." Whenever I asked if something was wrong, he hid behind the same excuse. Work was crazy. I wanted to believe him. His construction company had taken on several new projects. Stress made sense, so I ignored the unease gnawing at me. Then came Joseph, a new friend from work, beers after shifts, games at Joseph's apartment. Gradually, Richard stopped coming home with stories to share. He came home distracted, thumbing at his phone, affection reduced to a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. I convinced myself this was temporary, that he just needed space. Karen, my best friend, insisted it was nothing more than cold feet. Pre-wedding jitters, she called it, urging me to reconnect with him before I spun myself into paranoia. So, last Friday, I tried. I wore a dress that had been gathering dust in my closet, booked a table at the new Italian restaurant downtown, even stocked his favourite beer in the fridge for later. The evening was a disaster. Richard barely looked at me, as if every word I spoke was static. When I dared to mention the honeymoon, he dropped the kind of bomb you can never recover from. I don't know if I'm ready, not just for the trip, for all of it. The wedding, the marriage. I froze. 5 years together, 8 months engaged. And now he wasn't sure. He spoke of conversations with Joseph, how marriage ruins men, how Joseph's brother's divorce had turned ugly. My throat burned as I tried to reason with him, to remind him who we were, but the restaurant walls seemed to close in, every pair of eyes heavy on us. Our entrees went cold, untouched, while my world fractured in slow motion. The ride home was suffocating silence. At the apartment, he muttered that he needed time and collapsed onto the couch, leaving me to cry alone in our bed. By morning, we moved around each other like strangers sharing a cramped Airbnb. He mentioned plans to meet Joseph and the guys at the Rusty Nail to watch the game. I didn't argue. I had no fight left. Instead, I let Karen drag me out for coffee. She listened as I unravelled everything, nodding softly, insisting Richard was overwhelmed, not cruel. Later, we wandered through aisles at Target, retail therapy numbing me with throw pillows and shampoo I didn't need. By evening, I felt steady enough to drive home. That's when my phone buzzed with a message from Matthew, one of Richard's co-workers I'd met at their Christmas party. "Are you okay? Things got weird at the Rusty Nail?" Panic clawed at me. I called him immediately. Matthew's voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. He didn't want to get in the middle of it, but after I pressed, his words cut me open. The guys had been teasing Richard about settling down, asking if he was really ready to be with one woman forever. Drunk, laughing, Richard admitted he wasn't sure about the timing. Then, when pushed harder, he smirked and said something like, "If you were prettier, maybe I'd be more excited about marrying you." That's what he said. My fiancé, the man I trusted with every corner of my heart. Matthew told me Richard tossed the words out with a laugh, pretending it was a joke, as if cruelty could be disguised with a smirk. The other guys called him out, but Richard brushed them off, muttering, they couldn't take a joke. I sat in my car outside our apartment for 20 agonizing minutes, clutching the steering wheel like it could hold me together. My chest felt hollow, my face wet with tears I couldn't stop. 5 years of love reduced to a cheap punchline. And the worst part? He meant it, or at least some piece of him did. Alcohol loosens truth, not lies. When I finally dragged myself upstairs, Richard was sprawled on the couch, still in his clothes from earlier, the air thick with the bitter stench of beer. I scooped up Beans, our cat, and shut myself in the bedroom, locking the door like I was barricading against an enemy. By Sunday morning, the smell of bacon wafted under the door. His predictable apology breakfast. Richard stood in the kitchen with dark circles under his eyes, looking both sheepish and fragile. But when I asked him about Matthew's words, his face collapsed. He scrambled to excuse himself. "I was drunk," he said, rubbing his temples. "The guys wouldn't shut up about being tied down, and I said something stupid to shut them up. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" My voice cracked. "You humiliated me in front of your friends. You made me the punchline." He winced, muttering, "It wasn't my intention." Then, as if that excused anything, he added, "They were just ragging on me. Guys being guys." Those words nearly undid me. He didn't understand, or maybe he didn't want to. We spiraled into an argument neither of us could win. He insisted he was stressed. Money, pressure, the looming wedding. But I couldn't push past the cruelty of his remark, the ease with which he had reduced our future to a joke about my appearance. I couldn't stay there. Not with him. Not that night. I grabbed my purse, ignored his pleas, and drove to Anthony's apartment. My brother has always been my harbour in storms. When I told him what happened, his jaw tightened, and I saw pure fury flash across his face. "I'll go to him right now," he said, fists already clenched. It took everything in me to calm him down. I didn't want a showdown. I just needed space. All through Sunday, Richard texted apology after apology, begging me to come home, promising to explain. I responded only once. I need time. By Monday morning, the weight of it all crushed me. I couldn't face work, couldn't plaster on a fake smile for patients at the dental office. So I called in sick, my voice hoarse and thin. My boss was understanding. Not long after, my phone rang again. Ashley, his mother. We've always gotten along, sometimes better than I do with my own. She's been more like family than my mother in Florida, who rotates husbands like fashion trends. Ashley's voice was soft but urgent. She told me Richard had called her the night before, said there was something I needed to know. "Please," she whispered, "meet me. I'll explain everything." And that's how I ended up here, sitting in my car outside a coffee shop, staring at the ring on my finger, feeling like it's burning a hole in my skin. 15 minutes until I walk inside, and hear what Richard's mother has to say. My stomach is in knots. What else could there be? How much worse can it get? Was I blind all this time? Or did everything truly shift overnight? Should I even listen to her? What could she possibly reveal that would make any of this forgivable? First update. I never expected the flood of support after my post. Thousands of comments. I read as many as I could, though most of it was through tears, Oreos, and the numb haze of Anthony's guest room. Thank you, all of you. Yes, I met with Ashley. I'll get to that. But first, the last 2 days have been a blur. Monday morning, after posting, I curled back under the blanket in Anthony's spare room, scrolling endlessly through advice from strangers who seemed to care more about me than Richard ever had. Around noon, Karen arrived with sandwiches from that deli near the hospital. She set one in front of me and raised an eyebrow until I forced myself to take a few bites. You can't avoid him forever, she reminded me gently. You live together. You share accounts. Sooner or later, you'll have to face him. She was right, of course, but I couldn't yet. Not when I felt like a stranger in my own skin. Not when the thought of seeing his face made my stomach turn. That evening, Anthony's girlfriend came by, all warmth and cheer, and I excused myself to the spare room again. I didn't want to be the broken thing at their dinner table. After Karen left that night, I couldn't sit still. I showered, pulled on one of Anthony's oversized hoodies. It smelled like laundry detergent and safety, and told myself I was ready. No yelling, no tears. I was going to be calm, rational, mature. I was going to get answers. By the time I reached our apartment complex, my nerves were shredded. Richard's truck was parked outside. He should have been at work. My stomach twisted as I climbed the stairs. I unlocked the door and found him on the couch in sweats, pale, unshaven, and surrounded by the binders I'd painstakingly filled with 8 months of wedding plans. Beans, the little traitor, was curled against his leg. Richard's eyes lit up with a mix of surprise and relief when he saw me. I took some personal time, he said quickly, as if reading my question. I've been looking through all this, trying to figure out how I messed everything up. I stayed near the door, refusing the pool to sit beside him. Flipping through binders won't erase what you said, I replied. My voice came out flat, but inside I was trembling. What followed was less conversation and more excavation, digging through layers of excuses and half-truths until something raw finally showed. He apologized for the bar comment, calling it inexcusable, swearing he didn't even believe it. Then, why say it? I demanded. He hesitated, then shrugged with a pathetic half-smile. I was trying to look cool, in front of them. The answer set fire to my veins. So humiliating me is cool. I reminded him of dinner, his doubts voiced when sober. That wasn't alcohol. That was him. He finally admitted to feeling crushed under a tangle of stress. The project at work falling apart, Joseph's constant horror stories about marriage, and our budget ballooning beyond comfort. But instead of coming to me, he let it all ferment until it spilled out in the ugliest ways. Then he revealed something I hadn't expected. His father. Richard rarely spoke of him. The man who vanished when he was 12, who left his mother for a co-worker and fled to Arizona to start over. Richard always insisted it hadn't scarred him, but now he confessed. I'm afraid of becoming him, like it's in my blood, cheating, walking away. You are not your father, I said firmly. Genes don't dictate loyalty. His eyes dropped to his hands. But how can I promise forever when forever feels like a lie? I watched it unravel once. They looked happy until the day they weren't. It chilled me, hearing the depth of his fear. But it also enraged me. Instead of trusting me with this truth, he carried it alone. and let it fester. I asked if he'd told anyone else. He admitted he'd spoken to Matthew, the co-worker who had called me after the rusty nail. They'd grown closer, bonded over late-night talks about relationships. It stung, realizing Richard had bared his doubts to a near stranger while leaving me in the dark. "Then tell me now," I pressed. "What are you really feeling?" His voice cracked on the words. "Scared, overwhelmed, unsure about marriage, but not about loving you." He looked at me with desperate sincerity. "I do love you. I can't stop thinking about how fragile it all is, how my parents looked fine until they weren't. And what if I do that to you?" The irony carved me open. By hiding his fears, he'd already inflicted the wound he swore he was trying to prevent. Then I asked the question that had been rotting inside me since the beginning. "When you joked about my looks, was there any truth in it? Are you not attracted to me anymore?" His answer came in a rush, almost frantic. "God, no. I've always found you attractive. I remember the green sweater you wore the night we met, how you laughed when I lost at beer pong. I remember every detail." His face crumpled. That comment, it came from insecurity. I felt trapped, and I wanted to prove to them I wasn't. I thought making a joke would make me seem in control. "Control," I spat, "by tearing me down." He winced. Finally, I asked the question that would decide everything. "Are your doubts about marriage itself, or about marrying me?" The silence was unbearable. Seconds stretched into a lifetime. His hesitation told me the truth before his lips even moved. At last, he whispered, "Mostly marriage in general, but maybe a little about us too." The floor gave way beneath me. The truth landed heavier than the cruel joke about my looks. After 5 years, Richard still wasn't sure if we were right for each other. When I pressed, he hesitated, then confessed he sometimes wondered whether we'd grown in the same direction at all. He spoke about how I'd shifted since our early 20s, how my spontaneity had been replaced with relentless planning, how his own dreams of starting a business had withered under the weight of responsibility. "People grow," I countered, my voice sharper than I intended. "That's what relationships are, changing and building together." But he only shook his head. "Or apart." His doubt seeped into me like poison. I felt hollow, my energy drained. I told him I needed time away, time to breathe, to make sense of the humiliation, the secrecy, the uncertainty. He reached for me, desperation written across his face. "We can fix this. Therapy, counselling, whatever it takes. Just don't walk away." But I stood firm. I need space. I was about to pack when he mentioned my phone had been buzzing. 3 missed calls from Ashley. In the chaos of our unravelling, I had completely forgotten about our planned meeting. When I told him, his expression shifted instantly. Confusion first, then concern, then something darker. "What did she want to talk about?" he asked. "She said you called her Sunday night. She was crying, said there was something important I needed to know." The colour drained from his face. He stared at the floor, jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. "What did you tell her?" I demanded. "Just about our fight, about my doubts." His voice was clipped, evasive. When I pressed harder, he shook his head. "It's not my place. You need to hear it from her." Suspicion curled in my stomach. His refusal wasn't about protecting me. It was about hiding something. I stepped into the bedroom and called Ashley. She answered immediately, her voice thick with worry. She said she'd been concerned when I never showed at the cafe and asked if I could meet her right away. When I mentioned being with Richard, her tone faltered, like I'd said the wrong thing. That hesitation only sharpened my fear. We agreed to meet in 30 minutes. Before leaving, I confronted Richard one last time. "What does your mum know that I don't?" His shoulders slumped, his expression a painful mix of guilt and resignation. There's something I should have told you myself, but it's better if you hear it from her." He paused, then added, "If you want me gone when you come back, I'll understand." I packed quickly. A week's worth of clothes, toiletries, my laptop, shoving my life into a duffel. At the door, he whispered, "I love you." I swallowed the ache in my throat. Sometimes love isn't enough. As I drove toward the cafe, my phone lit up again. Emily, his sister. Her voice was anxious, urgent. "What's going on with you and Richard? Joseph mentioned something about a scene at the bar and Mum won't stop crying. Richard won't answer my texts." I told her I was on my way to meet Ashley. That's when she slipped. "Is this about Kimberly?" The name hit me like a car crash. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles blanched. "Kimberly? What about Kimberly?" There was a stunned pause, then the sound of Emily's breath catching. She stammered, backpedaling. I shouldn't have said that. Just talk to Mum, please." No matter how hard I pressed, she refused to explain. By the time I pulled into the cafe parking lot, my nerves were shredded. Ashley was already there, waiting by the window. Her eyes were swollen, rimmed with red. Whatever she had to tell me was heavy enough to break her too. As I reached for the door, my phone buzzed again. A message from Richard. "Whatever my mum tells you, please remember. I do love you. I just got scared. I made mistakes. I'll understand if you can't forgive me." I slid the phone back into my bag, inhaled deeply, and walked toward Ashley's table. My knees felt unsteady, my chest tight. Whatever came next, I knew it would change everything. After meeting with Ashley yesterday, I couldn't bring myself to go back to Anthony's apartment, or to the one I still technically shared with Richard. Both felt poisoned, claustrophobic. So I ended up at Karen's. Her pull-out couch isn't luxury, but it beats Anthony's storage room futon, and her cat Pepper doesn't seem to mind when I sob into a bowl of cereal at 2 a.m. But the meeting with Ashley? Where do I even begin? The coffee shop was buzzing with life that Tuesday afternoon. Students from the community college filled every corner, laptops open, earbuds in, laughter spilling across tables. Ashley had claimed a booth tucked into the far corner, one of those with high backs that give the illusion of privacy even in a crowded room. She looked nothing like the polished woman I saw 3 weeks ago at our family dinner. Her perfect bob hung slightly limp, her face bare, no mascara, no lipstick. In 5 years, I'd never seen her without makeup. It wasn't vanity, it was her ritual, the way some people can't function without coffee. When I approached, she rose and hugged me. Lavender dryer sheet clung to her sweater, the scent familiar and strange all at once. I ordered a plain black coffee, though what I wanted was something drowned in caramel and whipped cream. Somehow, it felt wrong to order sweetness when I knew bitterness was coming. We stumbled through small talk before Ashley finally exhaled and cut to the point. Richard had called her Sunday night in a complete breakdown. Yes, his fear of commitment and of turning into his father were real, but there was something sharper, something immediate at the root of it all. Kimberly. The name nearly made me choke. Kimberly, the new project coordinator Richard had mentioned in passing. The same Kimberly I'd shaken hands with at the holiday party, the woman with the confident laugh and impeccable blazer. Ashley's voice dropped as she explained, nervously shredding a napkin into tiny flecks. Richard had developed feelings for her. According to him, nothing physical had happened, but there was an emotional connection that had unsettled everything between us. The cafe tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of the table to ground myself, piecing together months of unease into a single horrifying picture. Kimberly had joined his company around New Year's. By March, he was already pulling away, glued to his phone, spending more nights out with work friends. What I'd excused as project stress now looked like something else entirely. I asked Ashley why she was telling me instead of shielding her son. Tears brimmed in her eyes, and suddenly the parallel became clear. She'd lived this story before. Before Richard's father walked out to start over in Arizona, there had been months of distance, snide remarks, pointless arguments, all to create space, all to soften the final blow. She had stayed, hoping, blaming herself for not being enough. She didn't want me to suffer the same fate. The comment at the bar, Ashley said softly, wasn't just drunken stupidity. It was self-sabotage. He was trying to push you away without admitting what was happening. We sat there for over an hour. She shared her own unravelling, how she tried to salvage her marriage even after learning of the affair, how she internalized the betrayal as her failure. By the time we walked into the parking lot, I felt gutted, hollow. Before we parted, Ashley said something that keeps echoing in my head. The hardest lesson I learned was that you can't make someone choose you. They either do or they don't. Anything in between is just prolonging the inevitable. Her words carved me open. Back in my car, I stared at my phone. 3 unread messages from Richard. I'm sorry. I love you. Please believe me. Not one mention of Kimberly. Still hiding. Still pretending. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Karen. Can I stay with you tonight? She didn't hesitate, didn't ask for details. The pullout's ready, and I'm picking up takeout. Karen was already on her way home with dinner when I texted Richard for the last time that night. I know about Kimberly. Don't contact me again until you're ready to tell me the complete truth. I'll be collecting more of my things tomorrow while you're at work. Then I blocked his number. Not forever, just long enough to breathe without his excuses filling my phone. Halfway to Karen's, Emily called. Her voice was tight with worry. What she told me confirmed everything Ashley had already shared, but added another painful twist. She had overheard Richard and Joseph talking the Thursday before, their conversation circling around Kimberly. Furious, she confronted her brother and demanded he be honest with me. He promised her he would. By the weekend, that promise was already broken. What stunned me most wasn't Richard's failure, but Emily's loyalty. Despite being his sister, she was unequivocally on my side. She told me I deserved better, that she wouldn't excuse his cowardice. The relief I felt in that moment was indescribable. Losing Richard was one thing. Losing his family, who had become like my own, would have been another blow entirely. At Karen's, I finally exhaled. Her apartment was a safe middle ground, neutral, unburdened by memories. We spread takeout on her living room floor, the coffee table buried under papers from her online courses. A baking competition hummed from the TV, but neither of us really followed the plot. The simplicity of it, the quiet companionship, the background noise, was like a lifeline in the storm. Later, after Karen went to bed, I stayed up scrolling through my phone. 5 years of Richard and me stared back at me. Vacations, lazy mornings, blurry selfies, the engagement photos where we grinned like idiots who thought love made us invincible. Every image felt like a lie now, or maybe a ghost. I started planning the next day. Head to the apartment while he was at work, pack more of my things, maybe even talk to the landlord about breaking the lease. That's when my phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. Lisa, this is Kimberly. I know you blocked Richard. Can we meet tomorrow? There's more to the story you should know, just the two of us. I stared at the message, heart thudding so hard I thought I might be sick. What more could there be? And why would she want to tell me directly? After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I typed 2 words. Where and when. 3rd, update. 1st, thank you all again for the flood of support. I've spent sleepless nights reading your comments, clinging to the kindness of strangers. Some moments I feel strong, others I break all over again. But I'm surviving. And yes, the meeting with Kimberly happened. It went nothing like I imagined. We met at a small breakfast place near the park, neutral ground. She was already seated when I arrived, hunched over her phone. She looked different than I remembered from the holiday party, less polished, more human. Her hair was scraped into a messy bun, minimal makeup. What caught me off guard was how uncomfortable she seemed. If she'd been carrying on some secret emotional affair with my fiancé, wouldn't she have been smug, confident? Instead, she couldn't stop fidgeting with her coffee cup, eyes darting away whenever I met them. And then came the revelations. The first, Kimberly had no idea Richard harboured feelings for her. None. She said she only learned about it when Joseph mentioned it casually the week before. She and Richard had worked closely on a project, sure, and sometimes texted after hours, but it was strictly professional. She showed me their text history. Deadlines, spreadsheets, the occasional meme. Harmless. She even had a boyfriend of 3 years, who sometimes joined their happy hours. There was no affair, no flirting, no line crossed. The second revelation rattled me more. Joseph. According to Kimberly, he had been deliberately stirring things up. She'd overheard him egging Richard on, telling him to explore his options before settling down. He even named her. Kimberly understands you better than Elisa ever could. At work, Joseph made constant jokes about Richard being trapped, about marriage being a cage. Worse, Kimberly said he'd been spreading it around the office, telling people Richard had cold feet and acting like it was an inside joke. By the end of our conversation, I felt strangely calm. Kimberly wasn't the villain I'd built in my head. She wasn't a seductress stealing my fiancé. She was just another person caught in the fallout of Richard's cowardice and Joseph's meddling. Kimberly wasn't the villain I had imagined. She was simply caught in the crossfire of Richard's weakness and Joseph's manipulation. Before we parted ways, she placed her hand lightly on her coffee cup and said something that cut straight through the fog. "You seem like someone who knows her worth. Don't let anyone make you question it." Her words became a compass. I left that meeting with a new perspective and a plan. This wasn't only about Richard and me anymore. It was about his family's ghosts, Joseph's toxic influence, and whether I was willing to keep drowning in someone else's unfinished battles. I texted Emily afterward, asking if she'd help me arrange a family meeting. Neutral territory. I couldn't face Richard alone yet. She didn't hesitate. Yes, my place. Tomorrow. The family dinner. Yesterday evening, we gathered in Emily's small but warm apartment. She'd ordered takeout from the Italian place near her building. Pasta, salad, breadsticks, comfort food with no pretense. Ashley arrived first, followed reluctantly by Joseph, whom Emily insisted attend. Finally, Richard walked in. He looked wrecked. Pale, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes hanging loose like he hadn't bothered with sleep or food. The first 20 minutes were excruciating. We sat around Emily's dining table, forkfuls of pasta going cold as we made awkward small talk about the weather, her new coffee table, anything but the reason we were there. The silence was a living thing, pressing down on us, stealing the air from the room. Ashley finally snapped the tension. "We're not here for a dinner party," she said flatly. "We're here to address what's been happening and to decide what comes next." That broke the dam. I told them what Kimberly had shared, keeping my eyes locked on Joseph. His face betrayed him, confusion giving way to defensiveness. He tried to cut in, insisting he was just looking out for his buddy. Emily shut him down immediately, her voice sharp as glass. "No, Joseph, enough." Richard barely spoke, his fork idle, pasta untouched. When I pressed him, He admitted Kimberly had been nothing more than friendly, but in his fear, he twisted it into something larger. Fear of becoming his father. Fear of forever. Ashley flinched at the mention, her own wounds clearly still raw. When I brought up the bar joke, Richard's face crumpled in shame. It wasn't about Kimberly. It wasn't about you not being enough. It was me, being a coward. Joseph was mocking me, calling me whipped, and instead of defending what we have, I tried to act tough. I hurt you because I was too weak to stand up for us. Joseph rolled his eyes, muttering, "Just guy talk," Emily snapped. "They were supposed to be married in 3 months, Joseph. Does that sound like just guy talk to you?" Her words hit me like a physical blow. 3 months. The save the dates already sent. Deposits already paid. My dress hanging in Karen's closet, waiting for final alterations. That's when I said it. Quietly, but firmly. "I don't think the wedding is happening anymore." The room froze. Richard's head shot up, panic in his eyes. He started to protest, but I cut him off. "I've spent this week trying to understand how we ended up here. And what I've realised is this. It isn't just about Kimberly, or a cruel joke, or Joseph's poisonous influence. It's about you, Richard, never being honest with me, or with yourself." I ignored the signs. Your disinterest in planning, your distance, the way you clung to Joseph's approval. I made excuses because it was easier than facing the truth. But the truth is, I deserve someone who's sure about me. Someone who doesn't need a family intervention to figure out if I'm worth marrying. Joseph scoffed, muttering something about me being dramatic. Ashley and Emily turned on him in unison. "Shut up, Joseph." Richard's voice broke. "I am sure about you. God, I'm terrified of ruining it." I met his eyes, steady. "You already did." The conversation stretched on for hours. There were tears, fights. Emily went after Joseph, accusing him of fueling Richard's worst instincts. Ashley confessed her regrets about staying too long in her own doomed marriage. Old wounds were reopened, new truths laid bare. By midnight, exhaustion had settled over us like a heavy blanket. And so we reached the only conclusion left. The wedding was off. 5 years, done. Not in a blaze of screaming or slammed doors, but in something quieter. The quiet of resignation. The quiet of inevitability. In the end, it wasn't rage or betrayal that undid us. It was the recognition that something fundamental had broken. Trust, maybe, or the belief that love alone could carry us through. Perhaps it could be rebuilt someday, but not in time for an October wedding. Not with Kimberly still at his company. Not with Joseph's laughter still echoing in my memory. Not with that barroom joke lingering between us like smoke that wouldn't clear. After the meeting, Emily drove me back to Karen's. On the way, she squeezed my hand and told me this didn't change anything between us, that she and Ashley still considered me family, no matter what happened with Richard. I wanted to believe her. At Karen's, I collapsed onto the pull-out couch in the dark. 5 years gone, wedding cancelled, future unknown. The silence was thick, pressing down until I couldn't breathe. I didn't cry right away. Instead, I opened the notes app on my phone and started a list. Call venue to cancel, deposit gone. Return the ring. Contact guests. Move out of apartment. Change relationship status. I stared at those bullet points like they belonged to someone else. My life reduced to errands. It was past 2 a.m. when Karen padded out of her bedroom, hair mussed, eyes half closed. She sat down beside me. No questions, just an arm around my shoulders. We stayed like that until sunrise, 2 women against the strangeness of my new reality. Morning. Today, I woke to a series of texts that felt like chapters in a book I never wanted to read. From Richard. "Can we meet to discuss practical matters?" The lease, finances, furniture, so adult, so final. From Anthony. When should I come over to help pack? Always the practical brother. From my mum. Do I cancel my flight? Gossip travels fast in my family. One of my cousins must have seen Emily's post online. And then there was the ring, still on my finger, though heavier now, as though it mocked me. I've been twisting it absently, a nervous habit I hadn't realised I'd formed. It's simple, a round diamond in a white gold setting. Classic, like Richard always said our love was. The irony cuts deep. I called the venue this morning. The coordinator's voice was kind, but the words were blunt. Non-refundable. $8,000 gone. Money we had saved by skipping vacations, by saying no to dinners out, by choosing necessity over luxury. The practical side of me hates the waste. The emotional side doesn't care. Small kindnesses trickle in. Emily texted me a lead on a photographer who might transfer our deposit to some future event. Ashley offered to call family members on my behalf to shield me from their pity. And Karen stocked the fridge with my favourite iced tea. Joseph, unsurprisingly, sent a half-hearted apology. These things happen for a reason. You'll find someone better suited. I deleted it without finishing the thought. Kimberly's message, by contrast, was brief but sincere. Her regret for being drawn into the storm, her assurance that nothing ever happened between them. I believe her. Strangely, she feels less like the cause, and more like collateral damage, a mirror Richard projected his fears onto while Joseph fanned the flames. The mundane. The hardest part isn't the dramatic unravelling, it's the mundane reminders. The wedding binder, still shoved in my tote bag. The Spotify playlist labelled Reception Vibes, full of songs I can't bring myself to play. The honeymoon research folder on my laptop, tabs of destinations that now feel like postcards from someone else's life. Each one is a tiny ghost, haunting me with a future that will never exist. Moving forward. Karen suggested I take a mental health day, but staying home with my thoughts sounded worse than filing insurance claims. So I went to work. My co-workers pretended not to notice my red-rimmed eyes, or the bare patch on my finger where the ring should be. Their silence was mercy. Tomorrow, I'm meeting Richard at a coffee shop. We'll exchange keys, divide furniture, discuss the apartment. He's agreed to move out. My name's on the lease, and he'll stay with his cousin. It's practical, tidy, the business of dismantling a life together. And yet, part of me still can't believe it's real. That 5 years can vanish into a list of cancellations. That love can be undone not by catastrophe, but by weakness, silence, and doubt. Last month, Richard and I were tasting cake samples and debating reception playlists. Now, we're dividing up kitchen appliances and negotiating who gets the PlayStation. I keep returning to something Ashley said during the family dinner. Endings are rarely clean or perfect. Most of the time, they're messy and sad and complicated. She would know. She rebuilt her life after Richard's father left, raised 2 kids alone, and somehow carved out happiness again. Looking at her now, you'd never guess she once carried so much pain. Maybe there's hope in that. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. Tomorrow, I'll handle the lease and finances. Next week, I'll start looking for a place of my own. Beyond that, the future is blurry. But at least it still exists. Emily just texted, offering to meet for coffee this weekend. She also mentioned that her family friend Stephen, an older man who's known them forever, offered his cabin if I need a retreat. The thought of disappearing into the quiet is tempting, but so is staying near my anchors. Karen with her practical compassion, Anthony with his fierce brotherly protection, even Ashley and Emily with their complicated, unwavering loyalty. What I do know is this: I won't be checking the wedding countdown app anymore. I won't be pinning reception decor or practicing a new signature with Richard's last name. That future is gone. And though I don't know what's next, I'm beginning to believe there will be something. Last update. It feels strange to write this now, from a different place in life entirely. 3 months have passed since the family dinner that ended my engagement. 3 months of dismantling and rebuilding in ways I never imagined. Some of you asked for closure, so here it is. The good, the bad, and the unexpected. The practical. Richard moved out within a week. With Anthony and Karen's help, I packed his belongings while he was at work, labeling every box neatly in the living room for him to collect. It was surreal, dividing 5 years into his and mine. The coffee maker he got for his birthday, the blanket we bought on a mountain weekend, framed photos that once made bare walls feel like home. Afterward, the apartment felt hollow, like a stage set abandoned after the curtain fell. I lasted 2 more weeks there before breaking the lease. The manager charged an extra month's rent, but it was worth it to leave behind the ghosts clinging to every room. Finding a new place was harder than I expected. The rental market is brutal, and my budget, now single, stretched thinner than ever. I ended up across town in a small 1-bedroom, further from work but with a tiny balcony. I planted herbs in cheap pots from the dollar store. The basil died. The mint thrived. Against all odds. I've chosen to take that as a sign. Adjusting financially has been its own lesson. Suddenly, every bill is mine. Car insurance, streaming services, groceries that somehow cost more for one than they ever did for two. I clip coupons. I buy store brands. I track expenses in a spreadsheet. Growing up in ways I never thought I'd have to at 29. The wedding vendors were more compassionate than I deserved. The venue kept our deposit, but sent a handwritten note wishing me happiness. The florist refunded half despite their no refund policy. The DJ, of all people, gave me his brother's number, suggesting I call him if I ever wanted music for a different kind of celebration. The unexpected, the support, from friends, from strangers online, from Richard's family who, against all odds, still claim me as their own. From Karen, who brewed tea at 2 a.m. and held me through silence. From Anthony, who shouldered furniture with me and didn't once complain. From Ashley and Emily, who refused to let Richard's weakness rewrite the bond we'd built. The good. I survived. I'm not whole yet, but I'm here, in my little apartment, watering my stubborn mint plant, trying to believe that endings, messy, sad, complicated endings, are not the final chapter. They're the first page of something else. The ring is still with me, tucked away in its original velvet box at the back of my dresser. Richard told me to keep it, or sell it if I wanted, that taking it back would be bad luck. I haven't decided. Some days I forget it exists. Other days I open the box, hold it in my palm, and wonder how such a small circle of metal once carried so many promises it could never keep. Social media was its own kind of punishment. I put off changing my relationship status for 2 weeks, dreading the tidal wave of questions. When I finally did, quietly in the middle of a Tuesday night, it didn't matter. Notifications poured in anyway. Messages from old classmates, long-lost relatives, co-workers I barely spoke to. What happened? Praying for you. Hope you're okay. Curiosity dressed up as sympathy. I posted one vague line about mutual decisions and privacy, then muted everything and tossed my phone aside. Later, I shared a single picture. A keyring with my new apartment keys, captioned New Chapter. It didn't get nearly the same attention as our engagement post, but it felt more honest. Richard. Since the breakup, Richard and I have only exchanged words when necessary. A misdirected piece of mail, the shared cloud storage account we forgot to split, his sister's air fryer I returned. Each conversation polite but stiff, like strangers forced into small talk while trapped in an elevator. Through Emily, I hear he's still at the same job, still orbiting Joseph, though less tightly than before, and still crashing at his cousin's place. Kimberly, I learned, requested a transfer after everything blew up. Once she heard the full story, she froze him out completely. I don't blame her. The real surprise came last month, when Richard asked to meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed, curiosity outweighing caution. We met at a cafe near my new apartment. Neutral ground, bright lights, witnesses, as Karen had joked. He looked worn down, thinner, darker circles under his eyes. Even his clothes seemed unfamiliar, like he'd slipped into someone else's life. We stumbled through a few minutes of meaningless chatter before he finally pulled a notebook from his bag. "I've been seeing someone," he said. My heart stuttered until he added, "A therapist." The journal was full of his reflections, notes on patterns, mistakes, fears. He told me he was unpacking his childhood, the shadow of his father, the poison of his friendship with Joseph, and the way he'd failed me. "I should have started this years ago," he admitted. "Maybe we wouldn't have ended up here." For once, he wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't trying to rekindle anything. He only wanted me to know he was working on himself. And I believed him. Not because I thought it would change what happened. Our ship has sailed. But because carrying that much unresolved hurt must feel like dragging a boulder everywhere you go. Before we parted, he said softly, "I'm glad you're still close with Mom and Emily. They need people like you in their lives." And he's right. That's been one of the strangest pieces of this breakup, staying connected to his family while severing ties with him. Ashley sends me memes and garden photos every week. Emily and I have a standing brunch at a diner halfway between our apartments. They've never made me feel awkward, never overshared about Richard. They've honoured the boundaries I set, and it's meant more than I can explain. Me. As for me, I wish I could say I've had some grand revelation, that heartbreak turned me into someone wiser, sharper, reborn. The truth is much less cinematic. Some mornings I wake up relieved, grateful I didn't marry a man who could tear me down so carelessly. Other mornings, when the water heater sputters or I can't reach the top shelf, I miss the ease of partnership, the comfort of not carrying everything alone. I've started therapy too. Not because of Richard exactly, but because losing him forced me to face how often I'd bent myself into shapes that didn't fit. How easily I ignored my own needs for the sake of keeping the peace. Healing isn't glamorous. It's messy, uneven, unsteady, but it feels real. In therapy, I've had to face some hard truths. How much of myself I gave up in that relationship. How many red flags I brushed aside because they were wrapped in the familiar warmth of routine. How often I let Richard's insecurities take up the space where my own needs should have been. My therapist suggested I start reclaiming the parts of myself I'd shelved. So I laced up my old boots and began hiking again on Saturday mornings. A ritual I abandoned years ago because Richard hated early weekends. Out there, with the smell of pine and the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes, I feel like I'm meeting myself again. Dating? That still feels like a distant galaxy. A few co-workers keep nudging me towards setups with this great guy they know, but I'm not ready. Maybe in a few months, maybe longer. For now, I'm practicing how to sit with my own company without feeling lonely. The strangest twist came from what I thought would be the saddest chore: cancelling our honeymoon. We'd booked a 10-day stay in a cottage by the coast, the kind with a deck overlooking the water. Non-refundable, of course. For weeks, I ignored the reminder in my calendar, unable to face another financial loss. Then, Karen, in her blunt way, said, "Go anyway, alone. You've never travelled solo. Maybe it's time." The idea unnerved me at first. 10 days alone in a cottage built for two sounded like the opening shot of some bleak indie film. But the more I considered it, the more freeing it felt. No compromises, no schedules. I could wake when I pleased, wander until I was tired, devour an entire book in one sitting if I felt like it. So that's the plan. Next week, I'm heading to my honeymoon alone. My bag is already half packed. 3 paperbacks, a queue of podcasts, and a swimsuit chosen entirely for comfort instead of appearance. My mum thinks I've lost my mind. Anthony offered to tag along for part of the trip. I said no. Emily suggested downloading a dating app just to see what's out there. Maybe someday, not yet. I don't know what I'll find at that seaside cottage. Maybe clarity, maybe more questions. Definitely sunburn if history with sunscreen repeats itself. The other day, I was grocery shopping when our song came on over the store speakers. 3 months ago, it would have sent me hiding in the frozen aisle, choking back tears. This time, I only felt a dull twinge, like pressing on a bruise that's mostly healed. Progress, not perfection. No, I don't have it all figured out. My new apartment's shower still can't decide on a water temperature. I managed to kill yet another basil plant. And every so often, I still reach for my phone to text Richard something funny before remembering that's not who we are anymore. But step by step, I'm remembering who I am. And that feels like a beginning.